Welcome back everyone to another episode of Shinkara. It's been a while, but today I've got a game for you that's pretty off the wall. One of my favorite publishers, Nippon Ichi, is known for their wacky JRPG series Disgaea, Hyperdimension Neptunia, and the Atelier Alchemy games. A few qualities these games mostly share are their grindy gameplay and tongue-in-cheek humor. The game we'll be discussing today, Mugen Souls, shares both of these qualities and may very well be Nippon Ichi's craziest game yet. With slingshot pinball attacks, 8 different personalities for the main character, and a giant bunny spaceship, what's not to love? Oh, there's also this crazy pop song intro too. Well, before we all lose our minds, let's take a look at Mugen Souls. Mugen Souls' plot is about as basic as it gets and is clearly in service of the gameplay. You play as Shushu, a crazy little girl who's the self-proclaimed ruler of the universe and plans on taking over the 7 worlds that lay before her. Each world has a certain theme to it, sun, fire, and water as a few examples. To take over each world, Shushu must defeat the heroes and demons that belong to each one. There's definitely a lot of fourth wall breaking like in most NIS games, and Mugen Souls certainly doesn't take itself seriously at all. The story segments in between battles do a good job of breaking up the game in interesting ways. You never quite know what Shushu and company are going to say next, but it's usually something ridiculous.
Oh man, this guy's pissed me off. I'm gonna pee on his ass right now.
I'm gonna pee on his ass right now.
I found the dialogue to be pretty humorous with a few laugh-out-loud moments that are pretty rare to find in games these days. Mugen Souls isn't the peak of literary prowess by any means, but you'll be sure to get a laugh or two throughout the game.
Yeah, I'm pretty amazing like that.
The gameplay of Mugen Souls is kind of like a crazy mix between Disgaea and the Hyperdimension Neptunia games. As you travel to the different worlds, you'll explore them searching for the hero and demon that inhabit each one. You'll be able to see the enemies you encounter before you actually get into battle. There are no towns per se, you basically are limited to your ship hub in various worlds. Think of Mugen Souls as a more open strategy RPG rather than a traditional one to keep your expectations in check. The combat in particular is nearly identical to Neptunia's, but those crazy Disgaea elements are thrown in as well. If you're within close enough proximity to your party members, you can perform link attacks that range from anything to attacking in tanks to spitting each other like tops into enemies. There are a ton of these funny link attacks and it was amusing to watch them all. After a while though, they sort of lost their appeal and got old. Aside from the basics, Mugen Souls employs a number of unique and complex elements to combat. The first of these features is the blast-off mechanic. You decide how much power you want to put into this attack and it will blast your enemies across the battlefield, bouncing other enemies and allies all over the place. The extra damage never really seemed to add up that high, but it was pretty fun watching characters fly all over the place. This could also be used as a defensive tactic for the more strategically inclined. Blast-off is definitely amusing and mixes things up when the combat gets stale. The biggest combat feature of Mugen Souls though is moe kills. Moe kills are basically when you recruit enemies onto your team. They're used to build up your ship's special attacks and to mix things up in battle. Essentially, every enemy has an emotion tied to them, which corresponds to one of your 8 personalities. To perform a moe attack, you'll need to have a matching character personality to the enemy you attack, and then say phrases that match with your enemy's current emotion. To be quite honest, this is the most confusing feature of the game and it took me a long time to figure out how it worked. Part of the problem is that it's kind of unclear what certain phrases are going to mean, and if they're directed at yourself or the enemy. I kinda got the hang of things eventually, but I just stopped bothering with it because it seemed to not work in my favor the majority of the time. It also doesn't really help that Mugen Souls heavily piles on the tutorials even hours into the game. The systems are difficult to understand, and it does the best job it can to explain things, but there are so many tutorials that it starts getting on your nerves. There's also ship battles before every new world that basically whittle down to a game of rock, paper, scissors. It's kind of a cool piece of gameplay if you like outfitting your ship and whatnot, but I found these battles way too easy. The pierce attack goes through pretty much everything and you're basically guaranteed to win if you use that every round. Speaking of the ship, when you're not exploring the worlds, you'll be able to do various things on it. You can upgrade equipment, change your character's looks, and even grind your heart away in a special dungeon area. If you're not a fan of these types of games, Mugen Souls doesn't really do anything too different to entice new players. However, if you're a fan of the NIS titles and enjoying their grindy nature, Mugen Souls gameplay should be right up your alley.
It's not like I'm interested in you or anything. I like you.
The presentation in Mugen Souls is a bit of a mixed bag. The character portraits during the dialogue and the soundtrack are fantastic. I really love the wacky designs and the bright colors. The music may have a familiar tone to it because it's the same composer of the Disgaea series. It has a good mix of those goofy tracks as well as some tense ones for battles. The in-game character models and environments, on the other hand, don't look up to par for a PS3 game. I personally don't really mind this either way, but they don't necessarily impress. The one thing that kind of killed Mugen Souls for me was the frame rate. During combat and on the ship, things run really well, but when you're walking around the worlds, the frame rate takes a nosedive and looks awful. I distinctly remember asking one of the people from NIS at E3 when I played Mugen Souls whether this was a work in progress, and they said that it was the final build that just wasn't translated yet. I couldn't believe that was true when they told me that. The environments aren't really packed with dense textures and NPCs, so I don't really understand how it got this bad. To be fair, I'm particularly picky when it comes to the frame rate for games, but many of you might not even notice it. Outside of that one issue, I feel like Mugen Souls hit it out of the park in the presentation department.
Ah, well, we've killed enough time here. Let's get to the Demon Lord's castle stat.
Aw, that tragic princess was really my type.
One last thing I want to touch on is the censorship in the game. For people who are upset about that, all you're missing out on is a minigame where you massage an underage girl in the hot springs. Mugen Souls would have gotten an adult-only rating or maybe wouldn't have been able to be released at all if they left that in. So for people saying they're not getting the game because of that, you're just silly. You perverts.
So, what next? You gonna sniff her sheets or steal some panties?
Overall, Mugen Souls is a bit of a mixed bag for me. It has fun, over-the-top combat, a wacky story, and great presentation, but then falls flat with a few complicated mechanics and frame rate problems. I've personally never really been a huge fan of these grindy type games, but I know a lot of you out there are. If you're not a big fan of NIS games or have been waiting for that right game to jump in on, I don't think Mugen Souls is going to change your mind in any major way. However, if you are a big fan of NIS, then Mugen Souls is pretty much everything you've come to expect from them, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Shinkara. Take care everyone, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks again for watching another one of my videos. I hope you liked it, and if you did, make sure you let me know by liking the video and leaving a comment. Let me know what you think of Mugen Souls and maybe if you're going to pick it up. And sorry for taking so long for this video to come out, but I'm going to spoil you just a little bit, and next week I'll have a video and I'll have another video right after that. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of it. Make sure you click the button and subscribe. I'll even have a special little Halloween episode on that day, so stay tuned.